Hello! Well, Pride Month has come to an end. You know what that means. It's time for Gay Wrath Month. Just kidding, but I do still want to talk about gay stuff because, I'm not a corporation. So let's talk about coming out. Now, this is a subject that I'm actually quite conflicted about. Coming out is a weird ritual that the majority of us in the Alphabet Mafia have come to terms with having to do. And frankly, I don't like that we have to do it because for a lot of us, it's a very anxiety-inducing event. Especially if you know the people around you aren't especially tolerable, or even if the people around you support you. Your hometown, for example, may not be a great place to be queer in. Personally, I find the expectation to come out instead of just accepting people from the start to be needlessly cruel, put it bluntly. I think a lot of non-queer people seem to view it as this coming-of-age thing where we learn to accept ourselves and it's all nice and sweet and happy when that's not really the case, at least in my opinion. We're actually exposing ourselves to your judgment and are seeing whether or not you respect us, which to me is ridiculously heartbreaking should that answer be no. Like, why on earth would you think that we look forward to something like that? And the worst part about this is that a lot of queer people do care about what their friends and loved ones think of them, and that's not their fault, so it's just an unpleasant thing to deal with overall. Believe it or not, a lot of queer people don't fancy getting kicked out of their homes and families because it's trendy. Luckily, I was spared from a lot of the burning bridges side of things, thank God. After I had finally come out to my parents and friends, who were very accepting and supportive thankfully, dare I say enthusiastic on my mum's end, they would still keep chattering in my ear like, so when are you gonna come out to everyone? And that more than anything was what I found annoying. It's literally no one's business what I do in my private time and who with. Why do people need to know that stuff? It's kind of weird. Anyway, let me come back down. As you can see, this is in fact a topic that hits a bit of a nerve with me, because why wouldn't it? So I would like to talk about how I tried multiple times through my life to come out and how I felt that those attempts were received each time, because it's just something I've never really worked through, and as it's just gone Pride Month, I would like to do that, and if putting it online helps ease the mind of any other LGBTQ+ people out there, then I think it's worth doing. So yeah, let's buckle up and dive in. So I guess we should start from the beginning as kind of an introduction. So this first time happened when I was in primary school, and it was actually an accident. I debated whether or not to put this part in because of that, but purely because of how easy it was compared to later attempts. I felt it was important to just kind of go over anyway, because I think it's important to remember that being gay is not something that is confined to older people. Kids tend to know when they're different just as much as anyone else does, even if they don't know how to properly articulate it. So from being tiny, I've actually hated romance and kissing scenes in films, and I'm actually still not the biggest fan, and there's a high probability that being gay and very likely on the ace spectrum was the culprit in that. However, I still had this strong sense of bonding with my friends and wanted to be there for them. I think that's the herd mentality kicking in. I never really knew what being gay was when I was young. It was still just used as an insult in those days, sadly, but I remember when I was about 6 or 7-ish, a girl in my class was crying alone on the playground, so I went up to her and asked what was up. She said that her granddad was going into hospital, which was horrible, but she didn't want to seem upset about it in front of other people because apparently that would make her gay. Yeah, obviously this is a very stupid reason to call someone that, but remember, we are talking about a bunch of primary school children in the early 2000s in the north of England. Not exactly the most tolerable of places, and also children can just be absolute little monsters for the sake of it. So in my little 7-year-old monkey brain, I immediately equated being gay with having feelings, which I guess is kind of right, just not in the way that we know it to be now. So what did I do? I remember this so vividly, but I started going off, like, well, so what if they call you gay? Your granddad is sick and you're upset, you're allowed to feel that way. Who cares if someone thinks it's gay? I'm gay! And she just burst out laughing and said, "You don't know what that means, do you?" Which was right, I didn't. But yeah, she just kind of stopped crying after that because I made her laugh, and she went back to playing with her friends, so at least I did what I set out to do, you know? I can't remember if she told people about that or what, because I don't remember being bullied for it that young, but yeah, that was the first time I came out, albeit unknowingly. I always think back to how easy it was to say that back then, because it felt so difficult afterwards when I finally learned the proper meaning. Sometime after I learned the meaning, I also ended up learning about other sexualities and genders too at around age 16, and the space between learning them and learning to apply them to myself was when things got a bit turbulent. So the next time I tried to come out, for real this time, it was in university and I was around 18-19, and I was also actually convinced I was ace. Basically, I'm a very placid person, I guess is the right word, I'm not too sure. I don't really engage in things like NSFW or anything similar, it's never really piqued my interest, and I've also never really developed any super intimate feelings until meeting my partner, so I just assumed I was never really meant to. A few people would probably classify that as demi, but honestly I'm still not really too sure myself. This confusion unfortunately though added to a lot of negative feelings that I had going on at the time. I was very miserable during my bachelor's degree. I was convinced that none of my new friends liked me. I obviously had a lot of identity issues going on. I had family issues that were weighing me down, and it was also pretty obvious that I had some undiagnosed depression and anxiety. In the bluntest way I can put it, I was kind of a drag to be around at the time, and I fully admit to that. And something that was also adding to this was the fact that there was a guy who I got the bus with to uni who took an interest in me. He used to play Train Simulator, so we'll call him Train Guy. He was a very lovely dude, very respectful, but I just could not find a common ground anywhere with him in terms of like interests and stuff, and also, you know, being closeted. Now, I don't know if this is a thing that many people who like girls experience, but as I was still very heavily in denial, when Train Guy was talking to me, and I feel really bad for this, I used to essentially bully him a bit as a form of banter because I just assumed that was what you were supposed to do. Basically because I didn't feel anything for him at all, I used to just kind of assume that in order to show interest in a guy, you were supposed to match their energy. And to me, a guy's energy entailed this weird sense of competitiveness, which I can only assume now was not aimed towards each other. Obviously I know better now, but it was a weird time in my life, and I do feel bad about the way I treated the guy. I hope he's doing well. There were other things that put me off about him despite that, but yeah. Another key player in all of these complicated feelings was a friend I made in my class who was very identifiable as part of the LGBTQ. We'll call her Butch, and the thing about her was that because she was so out and comfortable with herself, or at least that was the vibe she gave off, I kind of gravitated to her because I guess I wanted some semblance of that inner peace for myself. I distinctly remember that she was the reason I really started coming to terms with being queer, because when graduation was coming around and I knew that we weren't going to stay in touch, I actually cried about it late at night because she was one of the few LGBT people I A, knew of and B, was friends with at the time. I had never cried over a person like that before, but that was also when I realised that it just wouldn't work out either, because in my personal opinion, if you're having that kind of a reaction to someone who is completely in the dark about how you actually feel about them, then that isn't healthy. It was basically a parasocial relationship on my end, which I thankfully nipped in the bud because now I have the best partner in the universe who loves me and I love them. So yeah, me and Butch were in a friend group of 4 with 2 other girls, and in all honesty, I think we all just kind of stuck together out of convenience. We didn't really speak much outside of school, and anytime I tried to make conversation with any of them, it just felt really forced on both sides. It didn't help that one of them also had a habit of talking over other people, which I absolutely hate because I'm one of those people who will just wait until someone stops talking before I try to say my piece, so effectively that meant I never got to speak much at all. We'll call her Naruto Stan because she used to make Naruto AMVs on YouTube. The other girl was never really around as much, but one thing I do remember is that she was late to pretty much everything due to a messed up sleeping schedule. We'll call her Starbucks. My feelings about these friends were kind of mixed, but I ultimately decided my opinion on them when we had a class-wide weekend trip and 3 of us shared a hotel room except for Starbucks, who had her own room. Butch actually came out to us on that trip, and so back in the room we ended up having a conversation about LGBTQ and sexuality and things like that, and when asexuality came up, I basically tried to chime in with a meek little, oh, you know, I think I'm asexual, but as soon as I did, Naruto Stan was already moving the conversation along. And it was over just like that the second time I tried to come out, and this time it was serious, and I just failed miserably. And after that happened, I just kind of concluded that these friends just did not care about whether I was around or not. There were a few other things that made me feel that way as well, but that's a whole other can of worms. I do just want to say, before moving on, these friends were just normal people, so please don't think that they did any of this stuff out of like pure malice or anything. They didn't. Sometimes people just don't click as friends, and I didn't fully understand that this was the case for us until all of this had already happened. There were probably plenty of things that I did that made them feel the same way towards me, but anyway, yeah, let's continue. The final time I came out, it was at age 20 and it was to my mum and dad. A fun fact, one of my brothers is actually named after a drag queen, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea as to how tolerant my mum is. She, however, was not the person that was worrying me, it was my dad. Out of probably every person in my family, my best and closest relationship is with my dad. And that was one of the things that absolutely terrified me about coming out, in case that relationship was ruined. A few of the things that kind of scared me about coming out to him was the fact that my dad's side of the family is Catholic, and also that he isn't the most politically correct person on the planet, which basically amounts to, even if he accepts you, he's still gonna mock you, essentially. So in my final year of my bachelor's degree, for the first time I felt like I knew myself a lot more clearly and I knew what I wanted for myself. So me and Mum had a day out in town, we did some shopping, got some errands done, and eventually we went and sat down for coffee. And you know what? I don't even remember what we were talking about beforehand, but at some point I just looked her straight in the eye and said, "Hey, I think I'm gay." To which my mum responded, "Okay, so what? I still love you. You weren't scared of telling me, were you?" And honestly, my mum, no, I wasn't scared of telling her. It was more the fear that telling her set off a chain of events. And I think for that reason I went really numb afterwards, and I still don't know why that happened, but on the way home she asked me if I wanted to be the one to tell Dad, or should she? And I asked if she would be okay telling him, because despite what I said before, I didn't actually intend on telling her that day, it just kind of fell out. So I took the coward's way out and asked Mum to do it for me. So later that night I was in my room and he walks in and sits on the bed and says, "So, your mum just told me about your little bombshell. You know I'll accept you no matter what, but you do need to tell me properly if this is really the case. So come down when you're ready and we'll chat." And oh my god, my brain went into absolute anxiety overdrive. I thought he didn't believe me. I didn't even believe me at that point. After he walked out again, I just started thinking to myself, oh my god, what if I lied? What if I'm not gay at all? What if he's just in denial and he's asking me to prove it wrong, otherwise I'm getting kicked out? What if he hates me now? All of these horrible little thoughts just started to eat away at me until suddenly I just got up and decided I needed to get out of the house, just for a few hours. So I went downstairs with the intention of just going out and walking for a couple of hours before confronting him. Unfortunately, he catches me as I'm getting my shoes on and asks if he can come with. So we walk out of the door, and not even halfway down the street, I burst into tears. So he turns us back around and walks me back to the house. When we sit down, I just crumble and I deny everything. I tell him I'm just confused and lonely and I don't know why I told Mum I was gay, it's not true. And he's a bit visibly irritated because I'm obviously making no sense at all. I'm sending a lot of mixed signals here, so he says, "Right, okay, listen, I don't know what to really think or believe here. You really don't know what to think here. So tell you what, it's late, go to bed and we'll try again tomorrow. We'll try and think this through when we're both a bit calmer." So I went back upstairs. And the next day, it was as if nothing had happened. It was a regular Saturday, we did all of our normal things, we all just chilled out in the house until the evening, when we all sat down to watch some TV, and a woman was on who was very clearly a lesbian. I think it was the host from the Great British Bake Off or something, but she said or did something, and I just laughed and went, "Ha! Hey look, it's me." And they both laughed. And he turned and asked, "So, is that it? Are you actually gay?" And I said, "I think so. Is that okay?" And he says, "I just want you to be happy." You know, if there's anything I've learned about all of these attempts, it's that when you build something up to be a huge thing, it can sometimes end up consuming you and making you feel like the world is ending. But the thing is, things are very seldom as bad as you make them out to be. When you aren't sure how something is going to go, between the absolute worst and absolute best scenarios, most things tend to just fall in the middle, and you're left wondering why you were ever so worried. This, of course, is subject to a lot of things. There are people out there who don't have the same relationships and support that I do, and I wish nothing for you all but the happiness that you truly deserve. One of my dad's favourite phrases has always been, "Things have a funny way of working out. Just keep your chin up, and don't settle for anything less than what makes you happy, because it will always be worth it." Thank you all for watching, and I wish you all nothing but the best. Stay safe, everyone. Bye!